The rain had not stopped for 7 days. It was not the cleansing rain that gives life to parched soil, but a cold, relentless downpour that turns streets into rivers and silence into a deep, aching dread. In the old quarter of Rome, water seeped into the ancient stones of churches, filling crypts where saints had been laid to rest. The bells of Sant'Andrea, normally a call to prayer, now rang as a warning, their hollow chime echoing through flooded alleys where candles floated like tiny, desperate prayers. Inside a dimly lit chapel, Archbishop Carlo Viganò stood before the altar, his cassock heavy with damp. His face, lined by decades of service and battle within the church, was not one of fear, but of something sharper, urgency. The air smelled faintly of wet incense and candle wax. Before him lay a letter, its parchment already curling from the moisture in the air. He had rewritten it 3 times, each version a cry from his soul. This time, it would not be softened. This time, it would not be hidden. Cardinal Gerhard Müller entered quietly, his footsteps muffled by the worn carpet. His eyes, deep-set and clear, carried the weight of a man who had seen the church both as a fortress and as a battlefield. He glanced at the letter, but did not speak. Instead, he lit another candle beside the altar, the flame flickering unsteadily, as though it, too, knew that something was about to change. The flood is not just in the streets, Carlo, Müller said finally, his German accent cutting through the silence. It is in the hearts of the faithful, and it is rising faster than we think. Viganò looked up. Then we can no longer whisper in corridors. We must speak from the pulpits, from the rooftops if we have to. Their warning was not about water. It was about a spiritual deluge, a tide of compromise, moral erosion, and fear that had begun to drown the courage of the church itself. In the back of the chapel sat Sister Lucia, a frail nun in her 80s. Her habit was patched and faded, her hands knotted with arthritis. Yet her eyes shone with the same clarity they had when she first took her vows. She had seen scandals, reforms, and revolutions, and she knew the signs of a church in peril. She said nothing, but in her lap she held a small, cracked crucifix, a relic from her youth. It was her silent reminder the church was not built on comfort, but on sacrifice. Far away, in a refugee camp on the outskirts of a city torn by war, a priest named Father Marco knelt in the mud beside a dying man. He did not yet know that the words of Viganò and Müller would soon reach him and change everything, but his hands, steady in the rain, were already preparing the way. If you want, I can continue immediately into the rising conflict, where the warning is issued publicly, the prideful opponent resists, and the catalyst figure steps forward with a humble act. That changes the story's course. This will allow the script to flow into the emotional and symbolic build-up toward the resolution. Do you want me to continue the script now in that same slow-burning, immersive style? By the 4th, the small Italian town of San Pietro smelled of damp wood, wet stone, and the sharp bite of mildew. The river, swollen beyond recognition, had swallowed half the streets, carrying with it the splintered remains of homes, broken icons from the church, and once cherished family heirlooms. The old bells in the tower stood silent. Rust and water had stilled them inside the half-flooded church of St. Michael. Archbishop Carlo Viganò stood with his cassock muddied to the knees, his hands gripping the edge of the altar. His voice was low, but urgent as he spoke to Cardinal Gerhard Müller, who had arrived the night before from Rome. The people are not just losing their homes, Viganò said, his voice heavy with grief. They are losing their faith. They think God has abandoned them. Müller's eyes, tired but unflinching, met his. Or perhaps they think the church has abandoned them, he said quietly. The words hit like a lash. Viganò had been hearing the same from whispers in the parish, murmurs, that the bishops lived in palaces while the faithful waded through waist-deep water, that they spoke of heaven but could not reach down into the mud to help. At the back of the church, an old man sat on a broken pew, hands folded, eyes closed. His name was Padre Tommaso, 84 years old, a priest too frail to stand for long, yet still there every morning, whispering prayers over the stagnant water that lapped at the door. Faith, he had told Viganò the day before, is like a candle in a storm. You don't curse the wind, you shield the flame. But outside the doors, anger was rising. A group of townspeople had gathered, led by Stefano Moretti, a merchant known for his sharp tongue and deep pride. He had lost everything in the flood and now stood in the square, his voice cutting through the rain. The church preaches sacrifice, Stefano shouted, but where's its own sacrifice? Where are the treasures it hides? The gold, the art, the lands. While we drown, they sit in vaults. His words found nods and clenched fists. That night, Viganò and Müller sat in the dim vestry, the single candle between them flickering shadows across their lined faces. He's not wrong, Müller said finally. We have defended tradition, but perhaps we have hidden behind it, while the people's wounds fester. Viganò stared at the candle, his thoughts heavy. He remembered Pope Leo XIV years ago, walking into a refugee camp barefoot, pressing his ring into the hands of a boy who had lost his family. It had been a small act, but it had shaken the world. And now, Viganò felt the weight of choice: keep the church's treasures locked away, or lay them at the feet of those in the mud. The choice would come sooner than he thought. If you want, I can now take this directly into the pivotal turning point where the humble act shifts the whole story and drives toward redemption, keeping the emotional build-up slow burning. That's where the real transformation will start. Would you like me to continue in that direction? 2 days later, the decision came to him not as a command from Rome, but as a quiet certainty in the early morning stillness. The rain had finally broken, and the first fragile rays of sunlight poured through the cracked stained glass windows of St. Michael's. The water had begun to recede, leaving behind a landscape of ruin, streets coated in silt, homes gutted, the air thick with the smell of rot and despair. Yet the townspeople still gathered outside the church, their faces drawn, their eyes searching for something, anything, that might give them reason to hope again. Viganò climbed the creaking steps to the old belfry, his breath catching not just from the climb, but from the weight of what he was about to do. The bell rope was frayed, damp, and stiff from the floodwaters. For a moment, he hesitated. Ringing the bell without an official mass or feast day was almost unheard of. But today wasn't about protocol. With one strong pull, the deep, resonant toll of St. Michael's bell rolled out across the valley. People stopped in the streets, heads lifting, mothers paused mid-task, men dropped their shovels. The sound seemed to carry something more than a call to gather. It carried a promise. Within the hour, the church was full, not with lit candles and flowers, but with mud, debris, and the weary bodies of the faithful. They sat on whatever they could, broken pews, overturned crates, even the steps of the altar. The air buzzed with a mix of curiosity, hope, and suspicion. Viganò stepped forward, his cassock still stained from days of labor. My brothers and sisters, he began, his voice steady, but carrying an undercurrent of urgency. We have prayed for God to help us, but today, I tell you, God's help comes through our own hands. He paused, scanning the faces before him. The church is not stone and gold. It is you, and so, today, the treasures of the church will not remain locked away. They will be sold, and the money will rebuild your homes, feed your children, and restore your lives. Gasps rippled through the congregation. Stefano Moretti, standing in the back, crossed his arms, his face unreadable. This, Viganò continued, is not charity. This is justice, and it is what Christ would do. He signaled to the sacristan, who brought forward a small chest. Inside were chalices of gold, embroidered vestments, and even the silver cross that had hung over the altar for centuries. Slowly, one by one, Viganò laid them before the people. For a long moment, no one moved. Then an old woman stepped forward, tears cutting lines through the dirt on her cheeks. She reached out, not to take, but to touch the cross, as if to bless it before it left the church. And in that moment, the room shifted, heads lifted, shoulders straightened. Something unspoken began to stir, not just gratitude, but the first flicker of unity. Stefano stepped forward at last. His voice was quieter now, stripped of the sharpness it once carried. If the church is willing to give everything, he said, then so will I. He removed the ring from his finger, the only thing he had salvaged from his home, and placed it beside the silver cross. One by one, others followed. A fisherman set down his nets. A seamstress brought her last rolls of cloth. A child placed his only toy. The altar, once a place of solemn ritual, had become an altar of sacrifice. What happened in San Pietro over the next weeks would be spoken of for generations.